Hey y'all, I'm Dan Hamilton, host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board. Today I'm excited to be joined by the Executive Vice President and Chief of Staff at FinTech company here in Central Texas, Kasasa. Joseph, thank you for joining us today. Can you give the audience a little background on your military service?
Hey, Dan, first of all, thanks for having me, man. I really do appreciate it. I think what you guys are doing here is amazing. So I'm honored to be on the show. So just a little bit about my military background. I grew up in South Texas, and as soon as I graduated high school there, headed straight up to New York, West Point, New York, to go attend the United States Military Academy. And actually, as soon as I graduated, I actually selected armor. I was going to go be a tanker, like trying to be Brad Pitt there in Fury or do something, right? And so I was actually on my way to go do that. Finished armor training, advanced training. Was about to go, get ready to get into tanks. And they actually launched a pilot program out there. The Maneuver Center of Excellence is what the big schoolhouse is called in the Army. And basically, they're trying to figure out how to bring infantry and armor together. And so they kind of launched a pilot program and said, hey, we can get a couple tankers going to go to Ranger training and some light training. Maybe we can see how we kind of bridge the gap. So I was one of the guys that actually went on to airborne training, and then I went and finished that and then went on to Ranger training and kind of did a couple other things after that. And so my career, I never saw a tank my entire better part of a decade in the military. I spent all my time in the airborne paratrooper community, jumping out of airplanes and being on the light reconnaissance side of the house, which I absolutely loved. It was something I didn't realize I'd like. So really dug that. So I spent some time in Alaska, some time overseas in Afghanistan, and then finished up my career there at Fort Bragg, and where I got to work in the special operations community towards the end of my career. And then that's when we kind of hopped back here at Austin, Texas, got my MBA here at UT McCombs, and then went over and straight into Kasasa.
So can you explain to our audience and maybe to me a little bit as well what the services that Kasasa provides and how long it's been around?
Yeah, so Kasasa's been around a little over 15 years now, so not a brand new company. We're a fairly large company here as far as Austin's concerned. We're about 450 employees here in Austin. And so in a nutshell, the way I kind of like to describe Kasasa, we do kind of keep it local, but we are really about supporting our community banks and credit unions. And so if you can think about, you got the mega banks out there, they have enormous budgets, right, to be able to do marketing and innovation and all the things, right? And some of these smaller credit unions and banks really don't have the horsepower to bear to be able to come up with innovative products. So we all know they offer great customer service. We probably all have a story about like our grandfather was a farmer who got a loan or somebody, and they knew the bankers by name. Well, that customer service we knew was important to maintain, especially in America, kind of keep the money local, keep power local, so to speak. But we figured we really needed help, on the marketing side and on the innovation side. So what we did as a company is we said, hey, look, let us be your chief innovation and chief marketing officer. And kind of let's go ahead and bring the aggregate here. We can kind of use all your horsepower together to come up with a company that's going to allow to provide really awesome services down to you all so you can provide great products. So the way I kind of describe it is Kasasa are more like Johnson & Johnson or, Procter & Gamble, whatever you want to call that. A little bit more of this kind of like we got branded products that we can find at any single credit union or bank that carries our products. And if you, Dan, are a consumer, you ought to be able to walk in there and say, oh, yeah, that's a checking account I recognize because it's a Kasasa checking account or a Kasasa loan. And so what we do, just kind of in a nutshell, again, is we provide that kind of widespread product offering up to our credit unions and banks, and to be able to provide consumers really cutting edge products with that good old home customer service.
And is this also a software product as well? Or are you working specifically with the customer, or are you guys working primarily just straight with the banks to offer them services that they can provide to their community?
Yeah, so we are actually primarily business to business, straight with the banks and credit unions who then offer it to their consumer. But it's everything from software. It is your traditional cutting edge fintech financial technology company where we're producing in-house native software that goes out to the public and provides really cool user experiences similar to you would find at some of these other cutting edge financial tech companies. In addition to that, we also provide a lot of things that are more on the consulting side, really being a consultant to these CFOs and CEOs and really help them manage their book of business.
So I'm always interested, here on the program, we have the opportunity to talk about the lessons learned, leadership, a mindset of service, as well as setting the example when you're in the military, and you get to practice those traits, you get to practice those characteristics, and you get to see them from your junior service members all the way up to the general staff. From your military experience, your time, extensive amounts of training and deployments, how do you think that those lessons learned, and how do you think those experiences apply to the very unpredictable and uncertain times that we are experiencing right now in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. I think right now it's interesting. I think you find folks are actually enduring the test right now, and a lot of companies are at the point where they didn't realize they were maybe standing on as strong a foundation as they could have. So when I go back to my military experience, I think about the culture we kind of took for granted while we were there. And when you walk into, whether it's the Marine Corps or the Army or whatever branch of service you are, I mean, it's like a hot room that you can, the culture is thick in there. It's already been established with centuries and centuries upon, just history and accolades. But when you sometimes walk into some of the younger companies out here, even a 15-year-old company, you got to really make sure that during trying times, you're really ready to kind of get through the hard times, right? And what did you do beforehand? So when I think about something specific, kind of maybe more answering your question on the head there, when I think about some of my military experience that I brought to bear here with the company and things that I kind of reach into my kit bag all the time and kind of help with, good cultures and companies that can deal with this new remote work and work from home and those kinds of things, good cultures and good companies, I think, are predicated on a foundation of trust. And it really isn't cliche. I mean, I think about actually getting ready for this interview here, just kind of thinking about some things. One of the things that sticks out to mind on one of the experiences I had when in the military, and it always just stuck with me, had a good buddy of mine, went to West Point together. Then we found ourselves kind of going through that same Ranger training pilot program. We both were supposed to be tankers, and then we kind of went this other direction. Then we found ourselves in the same outpost called Wilderness out there in the eastern provinces of Afghanistan there. And so we found ourselves there kind of fighting with the enemy out there, but really trying to figure out how we work together. And I get oftentimes folks say, well, this must be nice that one of your best buddies was next to you the whole time. And I said, to be honest with you, the better part of a year, I didn't see him very often. Because we were all kind of counter mission cycles. I'd go out, then he'd come back, I'd go back in, he'd go out, so on and so forth. And I remember one particular time we were actually out there on an operation and we both had gone out. We kind of left the skeleton crew back at the outpost. And we both had actually gone out to go kind of conduct this larger mission there. And he was several kilometers away on another ridgeline, kind of overwatching us as we were kind of coming through the village. And when I realized over that 10-day period, I never saw his face once. All I did was, radio signals, getting some understanding of where we're at on the battlefield. But that only could happen with just really when it's, really established on a foundation of trust. And so because we had gone through a lot of similar training together and we'd gone through we understand what our shared values were, I think we really understood kind of where we stood and we could trust each other. I think companies now, where I find kind of coming into this, ask us a lot of questions about, I get a lot of companies that reach out and ask, hey, Joseph, how do we kind of establish this? We're doing remote work right now, but it's a little bit difficult for us to get used to this new norm, because managers really want to get their hands around, kind of what's going on. And instead, I think what we need to focus on, this is a good reminder that we should focus on a lot of the foundational things so that when we do kind of come into these situations, we really do find ourselves being able to adapt much better.
How has Kasasa adapted to the, remote work, work from home environment? Do you think because of the strong culture there that it has been, I don't know if the term is easy, but you've been able to adapt to it maybe a little bit quicker than your competition?
Yeah, I think so. I think I can wholeheartedly answer yes. The culture of the company, the reason Kasasa is something that I'm still with even today is, we all kind of have, especially as military folks, we kind of have maybe a preconceived notion of what cultures are like out here in the civilian world. When I actually came into Kasasa, I found a really culture-rich environment, a positive culture-rich environment. And so I think as a company, we've actually been able to adjust quite well. And I think it goes back to like the military roots on what we establish as good cultures, right? It's really kind of predicated on a couple things. Do we have a strong set of values that we all believe in? Do we feel like we're marching to a common mission and something that we all believe is the right thing to do? And then finally, is that ultimately going to make the world a better place? And I think if you bring those three things together, then you kind of are set up to be able to endure kind of anything the world throws at you. And so in Kasasa's particular instance, the company kind of already was that way even before COVID. So I think, culture is not much more of a test of how good your technology is to be able to deal with remote work, but it's more, again, back to trust, and it's back to, do we believe in it? So again, at Kasasa, the reason I think we're better at it than maybe most companies is because we've kind of rooted ourselves in values. We actually have 4 particular values that we march to. Every strategic decision, every tactical decision is made in the construct of those values. And we also believe that truly we're making the world a better place by kind of decentralizing power and keeping kind of financial money back in the communities and helping credit unions and banks kind of do what they do. So when you have a team that believes what they're doing is right, it's really easy to just say, you know what, I know the world's changed around me, but I'm going to go adjust with it.
So how have you personally adapted with the work from home environment? Are you somebody who thrives in an office environment where you have staff around and you get to talk to people at lunch, you get to build those relationships? You know, I think there's a lot of people who are listening to this that do miss that environment. And then you probably have a lot of employees or friends who are at different businesses who go, man, I can do this. Like, I can work from home. I can carry out my mission. I know what's expected of me. And look, I don't have to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours in traffic. I get to cut down on some expenses. And, you know, the digital platforms, you know, such as Zoom or whatever it may be, can keep me in contact with my boss and my manager so I don't forget those core values. Talk about your experience personally, and then kind of what you're seeing maybe in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. So personally, I think we can probably tell from this conference, I'm an extrovert. So for like, human connection is important. But I even think for our introverted folks, you know, I think human connection is important, right? To a certain degree, you got to be able to kind of have interaction points. So what I've been able to do, just because I know that's important, even in a remote forum, right? To me, it reminds me, again, just back in my days in the military, sometimes you got to kind of break a little bit of the professional lingo over the radio and just kind of say something that's a little bit more of an inside joke or something that you check in with, even over the net. And it just gives people connection back again. And so that's what I do here. What I've had to do to kind of adjust is I'll do kind of random check-ins. I'll just do a call in, just a random Zoom. And we actually use a platform called Slack. And so we'll just ping folks, and I'll just ping folks out of the blue. If they answer, great. If they don't, and they'll open up and, hey, Joseph, what can I help you with? I'm just checking in. Hey, how are you doing? What's going on? You heard this project. And for me, it's been able to, not trying to ambush them, but what I'm trying to do is create that sense of that in the hall passing by, right? Making sure that you're kind of connecting with people more than just, hey, what's the project look like? You know, more like, hey, how's the family doing? Are we checking in? So for me personally, that's been a really good step, and to be able to kind of adjust to the remote work atmosphere. And then I think in addition to that, personally, kind of outside of work, what I think has been good, just like you see market corrections happen with the economy, I think it was a bit of a social correction that happened. We all kind of stepped back and said, maybe grinding and what we've been doing, working so hard, isn't always the best thing, especially when I think we really look at our days. We spent 2 or 3 hours on the road in the traffic here in Austin. Maybe let's repurpose that with spending a little more time engaging with our family. Maybe let's go spend some time working on our health and a couple other things. So for me, I actually think overall, minus the, you know, the tragedy that's kind of happening across the United States right now with the deaths and things going on with COVID, outside of that, I actually think I think there's some good that's come out of this whole situation.
Do you think this is something that has a lasting impact on business? I think specifically with fintech, I mean, you guys are really in the middle of, you know, I'm guessing you have some exposure to PPP loans and the way that banks are moving money into their local communities to try to keep businesses afloat, to try to keep people employed. As you are watching this and you have a leadership role in a company that is in an industry that is really growing, and that people across the United States seem to be depending more on, and you talked earlier about trust, that people are having to trust the fintech industry, whether it's PayPal or it's Venmo or these sorts of things that we interact with on a daily basis. Maybe we don't necessarily think about how impactful it is, but do you think the country as a whole continues to move towards the fintech sphere? And do you think that the flow of business will be changed over, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, 100%. I think to answer your question, Dan, I think there's certain things we're not going back to. You know, that was just that kind of like that little boost, that little kick we all needed to just get comfortable, right? We all kind of had this idea of what the world's supposed to look like. And then finally someone sailed across the ocean and told you it was round. And I think that's kind of what we're countering here, right? And so in this particular case, the thing we're finding with fintech, to be, you know, specific, there's a lot of little things that a lot of even our own institutions were trying to figure out how to grow out of, right? They were very branch heavy, right? We had brick and mortar buildings across the United States. And then all of a sudden COVID broke out and we can't get people in those buildings to open up checking accounts or deposit. And so a lot of them, they were reluctant to online account opening or to using an app to be able to do their business there, even though I think the millennial generations and generations afterwards have been a little bit more apt to using it. still a huge population of boomers and folks even before that were just kind of not as comfortable. We're kind of used to going into the branch, getting that coffee and that little bit of, thing that, and kind of waited up on our banker to kind of let us know what our account is. And so a lot of those things I think have been a healthy boost. And I think what folks have realized is now using and engaging the app, applications there and engaging technology is kind of say, you know what, I really like this. Now I don't have to spend 45 minutes on the road and coming back and make sure I got all my paperwork with me. I can do and interact where I want to be. And so I think overall, we're actually moving in a great direction. And I think a lot of folks are adopting this tech forward stuff, especially as we're seeing, the whole financial sphere really change around us. I think 5 or 10 years from now, Dan, a lot of branches and a lot of things that are out there would just kind of be something that we're not as familiar with anymore. And technology really is going to bring us in there. So I do think this time has allowed us to kind of boost ourselves into the next chapter, so to speak.
Can I ask you about, for veterans who are recently separated from the military or those in the armed forces that may be listening to your story and they want to know what an executive vice president or what the role of the chief of staff is within a business? Can you give us a little bit of background on your day-to-day, how you approach it, and what your responsibilities are as the chief of staff?
Yeah, that's great, man. So personally, there's a couple of things. There's some routines, old habits die hard, and I never let go. I still wake up in the morning, first order of the day is PT. I'm going out there for a run or whatever. And
get your PT in?
I get my PT in, and there's a gym right by the office. And so when we used to, what I found though, is just kind of, you actually start to encourage others. I've actually had folks at the office kind of say, hey, I noticed, you were running to the office kind of sweaty the other day, showering and stuff. You work out every single morning beforehand. And what it does, it kind of encourages them to kind of get into a routine as well, instead of being so sedentary and kind of really just engaging first thing off the bat into your computer. So from a routine standpoint and kind of to answer your question about what it is that I do, I kind of keep some of those routines alive. The other things that I do just specifically on the executive vice, kind of wear two hats. On the executive vice president side of the house, I run an organization in the company that's called the Strategic Objectives Group. And really that, you can think of it almost as an incubator, as a startup. We got probably 8 general managers that, are kind of under my purview there. And what they do are they're working on new products and new innovative, kind of offerings out to the market, and really just testing and pressure testing, seeing if it's going to work. So my job to kind of sit on there, provide mentorship, guidance, make sure they're resourced, just like you would see an incubator here down in Austin. And we're really just trying to see what's the next thing that's going to take off and how do we give kind of all the effort possible. So in addition to managing that, I also manage this multifaceted hat called Chief of Staff. And it is an absolute, everything. It's an absolute, I really enjoy working that job because you just don't know what you're going to expect in that role. But if I had to boil it down to like, what's the day-to-day of it look like, to kind of some simple things, it's investor relations. It's being a senior advisor to the CEO and to the chairman, really letting them know what the pulse of the company, because there's some things that you can't tell on a financial statement, really how the company's performing. And so, really being able to give a pulse on, hey, these are better ways that we can do business, or hey, this is kind of what I'm seeing in the market, and maybe this is how we can kind of keep a hand on talent management, so on and so forth. And then the final thing is really just being a utility player on the executive team. There's certain kind of items that come up that don't quite fall perfectly into the chief technology officer's role or to the chief marketing officer's role. And so sometimes when there's some cross-functional dependencies and a team that needs to get stood up, you put up a task force, do something really hard and concerted. Oftentimes the CEO will, can't be in many places at one time. And so it's kind of a way to split their power as a deputy and kind of work on some other things and work on some cross-functional initiatives that really need that extra boost in horsepower. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what the day-to-day looks like. It's a little bit of everything. And it's really been a good ride, waking up every single day, just kind of wondering what the next thing, to kind of work on is.
So is there something about the job, maybe a responsibility or the flow of it or the people that you enjoy most, that you just say you wake up every day and you go, man, I can't wait to work on this problem or fix this thing or provide this solution for the company or our clients? Or, is it just kind of the personal relationships? What about it continues to keep you motivated and to almost make the job fun?
Yeah, it's 95%, Dan. My job is 90, and this is, hopefully I'm not shooting myself in the foot by saying this, but like it is 95% people, my job. And, if I think about like the engines in a car, right? You think about the executive team being the pistons, right? They're the ones really cranking out the horsepower, CEO being the gas that really creates that momentum. Chief of staff really is the oil between the pistons, just makes everything kind of work. And what I've found is even the most technical conversations can go askew because of some interpersonal relationships or some misunderstanding on how different priorities got lined up, or things were said strategically last week and they don't kind of really balance out with what we're working on this week. So a lot of what I look forward to is really cracking into the nuances of the people relationships, because ultimately everything that you do, to include software, is still, it's still people that's doing the work. And so I find that what I find exciting is that I get to leverage hopefully a strength of mine, which is being able to engage with people and be able to understand what's really wrong here, and then let's go figure out how to get to a solution.
So is that people, working with personnel, understanding interpersonal relationships? Do you feel like that was something that you're naturally gifted at, or if you had to work on it?
I mean, I think I've definitely have had to, I think I've gotten experiences over the years that's really helped me get better at it. But I think it probably starts when I was a young kid working in like my mother's restaurant or something. Just being able to engage with people, even as a busboy, even trying to be polite, trying to grab their dishes, not get them mad at, because you're trying to not mess up their meal. Just trying to be that face that allows people to interact with you, that's approachable. I think I probably learned at an early age. And then I think it's what kind of made the difference for me while I was in my military career. I mean, we can be pretty dress in the military. And so for me, being able to kind of break a little bit of the ice, just with being able to have a little bit stronger personal relationship, be more approachable to folks, I think is it's probably something I had a little bit more of a natural gift than maybe some others.
I'm interested to know, did you find your journey from Afghanistan to Kasasa as an executive vice president, was it a straight line? Was it a one-to-one transition? Was it, I think some people, regardless of their career or if they've served, there's kind of a natural progression to their career. They're able to follow that natural progression. I'm interested to know if that was the same way for you, or if there was maybe some bouncing around or some uncertainties at some point during your transition out of the military.
Yeah, 100%, Dan. The journey was not a straight line. And anybody I think who tells you that, I would always question if that's really true. I'd always say it's easier to connect the dots when you're looking backwards, right? Everything makes sense. You get these folks that have a career for 40 years and they can template out exactly how it went. For me, that wasn't the case. I would say I still feel very fortunate and blessed that I kind of ended up being able to do something that I love out here in the outside. But even for me, that transition from a career I absolutely love and adore, the military, to the civilian world, was still something I kind of had to navigate through. And for me, I was actually one of the earlier guys in my kind of peer group to kind of get out and transition out. And so for me, I felt like I was kind of macheting a lot of the pathway, trying to really figure out what was in front of me. The one thing I kind of kept hanging on to was kind of the way I see the warrior class in general. Back in you look at history, the warrior class, went out and fought in service of something they loved. And they didn't come back asking, for entitlement or for folks to kind of patch their wounds. It was kind of their obligatory duty to continue to lead their communities when they got back. And so for me, I said, there's got to be value I can provide out here. Even if I don't know anything about software right now, or am not an expert in finance or whatever those things are, there's got to be something I can offer that's got to help. There's got to be, because what I saw in the military was really the best of America. And so I got to believe that's a representation of what I can offer out here. So for me, even though it wasn't a straight line, I kind of kept marching that North Star.
Why would you tell a veteran to pursue a career in the fintech space?
I think we need more. There's a level of, I think we need more grit in that space. And I'm not meaning to diminish anybody out there who's in it right now, right? I think I've had some awesome folks that work in this industry and some of the best leaders I've ever seen. But there is a very tech forward mentality sometimes about the industry as a whole, right? It is about you can kind of lose a little bit of the people aspect of the career of the industry, and it can be kind of cold and just to ones and zeros. And I really do think what makes the difference, and I think that's what makes the difference at Kasasa, is that we put people first. And so I think in the military, we know that as well, right? All our assets, our most valuable assets, are the people. And so if I had to tell a vet, hey, why should you get into the fintech space? I really do think it's because it's something that you can immediately fill a gap. And they might look at me and say, well, I don't know any of these things, right? Well, you don't need to. That stuff I can teach, but I can't teach what your mom and dad didn't put in you, which is taking care of people, going the extra mile. And at the end of the day, just really being the kind of person who's just going to get it done. There's a lot of the times where I'll sit in a meeting and kind of wonder why we're missing deadlines. And oftentimes the answer will be, it'll be good answer. It'll be this and this and this didn't happen. So therefore the math didn't add up in the end. In the military, you know how you just kind of found if there's a will, there's a way, and you just kind of figured it out. And you always kind of had this no excuse mentality. So I really do think bringing that mentality into the fintech space will get it into the next, into the next level that I think we're going to all see it go anyways.
I'm going to change gears on you here before we start closing it out. But we get to do the Now You Know segment prior to the show. And if you're new to Next Gen Warrior, welcome. But we do a Now You Know segment where we get to ask our guests a few quick fire questions. That way the audience can see who is going to be on the show every Monday. So you talked about your love of F1 and your love of racing, and that you even, I think, have attended some races here. There's a big Circuit of the Americas track in South Austin. So I wanted to just ask you, what you enjoy about the sport, and who's maybe someone that you follow. What's the team that you like to follow, or the driver you like?
Yeah, no, sure. The reason I think the first part there is the reason I enjoy it so much. I think it's a high stakes sport. And even though, and I'm not saying that there isn't kind of, injuries and other things that happen there, but there's something about driving something that's just on the verge of being a bomb, right? Like you got this high performance engine out there and it's driven by people, which is just incredible. Especially nowadays, you probably have robots drive a lot of these things. We still manifest the kind of, the intensity that happens with the human being controlling the machine. And it's just really neat to kind of see that. And for me growing up, watching a dirt track, going to the old abandoned airstrip and watching folks drag race, it was just kind of a big part of, growing up and watching my dad and my uncles with their old cars. And so for me, that's what kind of.
Can I stop you real quick? Take us back to the dirt track, man. I got to hear about this. We've been talking about business and running a company. Take me back to the dirt track. I want to hear about this. Your uncle and your dad raced, and you used to get to go out there?
Yeah, well, no, they actually race more on the drag side of that, drag strip type side of the house. But for us, there's a local drag strip right outside of town, right outside of county. And it is a different world. It is not as refined as the F1 racing here in Austin. I mean, I'm talking about, all your fair food is there, and maybe just even a level lower than that, right? Like just barely putting together.
That's like corn dog food, huh? Corn dogs and popcorns and soda.
That's right. Hot dog water, the hot dog's probably in the water a little too long, whatever the case might be. But you go out there and it smells, if you ever smell race fuel, it kind of smells like strawberries. And so I remember that and that dirty grit and just that dust going around. And so I was fortunate as a young kid to be able to go watch those races and just kind of at early age, just kind of realize that, the horsepower was something I liked. And it was something that, kind of enjoyed the machinery. I suppose that's why I picked tanks at the beginning, even though it kind of went the other direction, but for me. But yeah, so, I mean, I enjoyed doing the racing stuff, down in, especially here at the Circuit of the Americas. What I enjoy about the sport too, there's also a lot of opportunities at that level of sport to give back. We actually partner here, Kasasa partners here with the Center for Child Protection. And so we actually give back, and every year we do a lot of donating, a lot of fundraising for them. So every year they kind of offer the track open as just kind of a thank you. And so when I get a chance to go, it's always kind of a neat opportunity. And last year I got to go, and it's just really neat to be able to drive some of these state-of-the-art cars around the track and to be able to just kind of support a good cause. But yeah, overall really enjoy that. And the teams that I kind of watch, I mean, I think you think about the big three there in Formula One, you got Mercedes and you got, you got Red Bull or some of the big ones in Ferrari that you kind of watch all the time. But I like watching some of the other folks that are kind of up and coming and really trying to make, you got McLaren trying to come back into the scene there, really trying to make their way through. And then you got some of the smaller, groups like the Williams Group and Williams Racing and other things that are mom and pop kind of shops. I say mom and pop, and they still have multi-$100 million budgets that are going into this. I really enjoy to kind of see those teams and really kind of some of the banter that goes on between the two teams, even outside of the track. It's always kind of interesting to watch.
So for somebody like myself who is a novice to F1 and into the racing world, I grew up a huge basketball fan, right? So to me, Michael Jordan is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. And I'm interested to know who, if you're new to the F1 world and you're like, who is the Michael Jordan of the F1 world, or who's the LeBron James of the F1 world? Who would that be?
Man, that's a good question. I think the names that come to mind, I think we got, Lewis Hamilton on his way up to probably being that for Mercedes. But Niki Lauda is kind of a legend. And if you've watched that movie, Rush, it's a cool movie.
Yeah, I did see that, yeah.
Well, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay. It's a cool movie. I think if you determine greatest of all times by the most amount of races, you might have a different name showing up here. But I really like the story behind the folks. And I'm also a big fan, just being a business guy. What's funny, I find me enjoying racing more than just the drivers. It's actually the business of racing. So you got guys like Toto Wolff and, Christian Horner running these big F1 teams as they're massive organizations. They're essentially CEOs of these racing organizations that travel to 20 something countries a year. And the logistics pack that has to happen when you're moving these cars from, Dubai all the way up to, Monaco and all these things, it's just kind of an interesting process. It makes me think that, appreciate, because I've seen that stuff firsthand in the military. And so you can kind of see that these guys and gals are super great at what they do. So I enjoy the business aspect of F1 racing as much as I enjoy the racing.
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I appreciate you talking business for us. I appreciate you talking about the importance of culture at Kasasa, as well as how your military service has really served you in an unprecedented and uncertain time. But I wanted to provide you the last word. If there was maybe a message that you would like to send to our audience, or maybe something that we didn't get to cover today that you'd like to chat about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just maybe a couple things there, Dan, if you don't mind. One of them being, let's just kind of wrapping the end on culture there. I think it's super important. Vets that are looking to get out and really looking to try to figure out what they want to do next. I really do think one of the things that can't be undermined is culture, leadership, that ability to have that grit through trying times. That's a technical skill. That's a skill that I think a lot of folks see. But to me, it's a technical skill, just like Picasso was a technical person who also provided art. Right. And so I think that this was something that I think we miss on a lot. Hey, we don't know anything. And so therefore, I don't know that I can provide anything. I'll tell you more than anything else, the most successful companies out there are predicated on strong values with a good mission, and they all believe that they're making the world better. Well, heck, that's the team we came from. We came from a championship team called the U.S. military that did that for a living. So I would tell them, don't be scared, get out there, right? Help these companies be better versions of themselves by elevating the culture. Right. It's not just ping pong tables and snacks. Right. It is about really, establishing the culture there. And overall, I think that what you guys are doing here is the exact right thing to do. The narrative should be take care of your own. There's definitely some hurt vets out there and folks that really need to kind of, fix themselves and get better. But overall, though, the warrior class, I think, has got a strong duty to go lead this country and continue to do that. And I think in order to do that, they got to really kind of step up and just believe in themselves. And how many times have we been given a job in the military we actually didn't know how to do? We just figured it out. It's the same thing out here. I think you find a good tribe out here, and then you kind of move forward. And that's kind of why, my wife and I have actually created some really cool organizations and some interesting things that kind of help build that following there as we kind of move along.
Well, Joseph, we're going to leave it there. I feel like we could continue chatting for another hour or so, but thank you for coming on Next Gen Warrior and telling us about so many interesting facets of business, the importance of establishing culture, and how veterans in the warrior class can really be at the forefront of establishing healthy cultures and strong cultures in the business that they're a part of.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate the time, man. It was an absolute honor and a privilege.
On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and the Texas Veterans Land Board, thank you once again for joining us here. We will be back again on Monday to provide lessons learned, advice, and insights on business, career, personal, and professional development. As always, I am your host, Dan Hamilton. We will see you next week.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.